Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, on Masechtas Bava Kama Daf Nun Zayin. We're going to begin on Nun Vav Amud Beis, about 6-7 lines from the bottom with the two dots Itmar. So we learned with regard to a Shomer Aveda. We were learning before about an individual who's a Shomer and giving it over to another Shomer, what the din is based on our Mishnah. How about when it comes to someone who is watching an Aveda? Says Rashi, Hichnas Avedas Chaver Lebeso. You actually brought something that belonged to another person, they lost it, and you put it into your house. As the pasuk says, Yasavta el Toich Beisecha v'Gomer. Sometimes that's the best thing to do, to keep it that way. Now, what status do you have watching this item until you actually are able to give it back to the rightful owner? So we have a machlokas. Rabbi Omer Kishemer Chinam Dami, Rav Yosef Omer Kishemer Sacher Dami. So it's a machlokas whether or not you have the status of actually being like a paid watchman, which is hard to understand. You're not really being paid. We'll see in a second. Or Shemer Chinam, which of course someone who is not being paid has less responsibilities, as we'll discuss at greater length in the third parak of Bava Metzia. So how do we understand this? So Rabbi Omer, first of all, says, Pasha Kishemer Chinam Dami, Ma Hanya Kamatile. He's not getting any hana, he's just watching it. So he's not getting paid by the guy. It's not like there was a situation where he finds it and there's a reward. That's not what we're talking about. However, Rav Yosef Omer interested in Kishemer Sacher Dami. Why? Bahi hana deloy ba lemesve barifto anil havi Kishemer Sacher. Very interesting idea. That since, well, let's look at Rashi. The oisik b'mitzvah patim and mitzvah. As is brought down in the second parak in Sukkah and elsewhere, the din is that a person who's engaged in one mitzvah no longer has the responsibility to do the other mitzvah. So since you're obligated to watch, this particular item, so because you're watching it, you're doing a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, and therefore if an ani is knocking on your door in a way that could impede upon you from being able to continue to watch this item, so therefore you're going to be patur from having to support this ani. So therefore, since that is the case, it's as though you're being paid, because since you no longer have to spend money to give to the ani, so by the way, it's not even an option. It's an unbelievable point that if a poor person knocks on your door, you have to give them money, right? It's an obligation. You have a mitzvah tzedakah. It's not a nice deed. It's a requirement. The only reason why you don't have to give it is you're oisik b'mitzvah of being a shomer. So therefore, maybe you're shomer sacher. So ika de mefarshi hachi. Some explain like this. Rav Yosef shomer sacher dami. Why? Kivan de rachmana she'abdi bal karchei. Since the Torah requires you to take this and hold it on to this Aveda, so it is a higher standard as a Shomer Sacher. Hilkach Shomer Sacher Dami. That's the idea. It's not the idea that you're saving money by not giving money to the ani, but the idea is the Torah requires you to take this object. It's your obligation. The Torah says you have to bring it into your house. So therefore it has a higher standard of watching, because the Torah wants you to do this. So therefore, you're like have the dinim of a Shomer Sacher, not that you're actually being paid. Simin achzil oyam hashiv chia amra nishmar sacher. Eis Rav Yosef, well, Rabba, you Rabba say that he's only like a Shomer Chinam as we continue to Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, but the Gemara says like this: Hechzira l'makim sheyirena. Let's say you return the object to a place where the Baal can see it. So in that situation, the din is enochayev latapelba. You don't have to do much more, says Rashi. The Shomer Chinam is pater migneva v'aveda. At that situation, he's going to be pater in general. This is just in general. A Shomer Chinam is pater migneva v'aveda. When it comes to a Shomer Chinam, he doesn't have to pay if something gets lost or stolen. The Shomer Sacher chayev. So that basically gives us an important detail that we should understand before we flesh this out, before we unpack this. So what we're telling us is that the major distinction between a Shomer Chinam and Shomer Sacher halacha is Geneva Vaveda. So if it gets lost or stolen while it was in your possession, If you're shemachinam, you're pater shemasachar, you're chayiv. So what happened? It says specifically what happened, that you put it in an area where the Baal could see it. So therefore, that's it. Therefore, nigdava of the chayiv b'achriyusa. But interestingly enough, even though it was in the Baal's sight, nonetheless, if until the Baal actually gets to it, it gets lost or stolen, you're still chayiv for it. Which sounds very clearly that you have the din like a shemer sachar, which is a kasha on the Mandiyar, which says Shamachinam. My nignama of what does that mean? Lav, nignama mebesai, v'avna mebesai. That's stolen from your house. And therefore you have the din of Shemer Sachar. Lo, mimakam shech zira. It means from the place where you returned it. Abakatani, eno chayv l'tapel. That doesn't make sense. It's hard to read, because if you're not chayv l'tapel, so then you should have no longer any more responsibilities, because you could see it. So if it says you're not mechayiv to do anything else, because it's now in the the vision of the owner, so then why, if it gets stolen now, would you be chayiv in Geneva Aveda? And in your house, you would be pater in Geneva Aveda? It's hard to understand. So the Gemara therefore has to explain that it was returned in the afternoon to this place. There's actually two pieces in how to read this. This is the proper reading. So again, really, you're a shemachinam. However, hechzira shachris, if you returned it in the morning, which Rashi says, shchiach inish bebeisei, in that time, in the morning, typically people are home. In the afternoon, people are doing work in the fields. Seems a little bit counterintuitive when it's nice and very hot outside. That's the time to work in your fields. But you can understand in the morning, they're eating, they're davening. So the early morning hours, a person's not necessarily found outside. They're more home. The afternoon is where there's more people around. So if you return it in the morning into a place where he normally could see it, even though most people aren't around, so l'makam shirena ushchiach de'ayel v'nafik v'chazila, and the owner of the object is typically going in that area, at that point you no longer have to do anything, because even though it's in the morning where a lot of people aren't outside, but this particular guy happens to be often in this particular location where this object is, and therefore because of that, once you put it there, you know that the owner is going to find it, retrieve it, and you have nothing else to worry about. And then we have a second case. Hachzira b'tzarayim, let's say you put it in the afternoon, u'makom shirena, and this is typically a place where a lot of people are, because in the afternoon there's a lot of people out in the street. However, interestingly enough, this guy has a different routine. He's deloi shchiach da'av v'nafik. He doesn't usually go out. Deloi chazila, because even though it's true, most people are out, but he doesn't, and therefore he's not going to see it, and therefore in that case, the nignava of the chayiv b'achriyusa, since you put it out in that time, you will be chayiv geneva v'aveda. So it's interesting. So even though it's true, maybe in your house you're like a shemachinam, but the fact that you put it out where there's so many other people, and he's not going to be one of them, so then you're going to be more responsible, because in your house, no one's going to get to it. But if you put it somewhere where there's a lot of people, but not him, he's not going to get to it. Maybe someone else will get to it, and there's a greater likelihood it's going to get stolen. And therefore, because of that, you're going to be chayiv in that situation. Okay. Eisvei, for the Gemara, so the Gemara asks the following. L'oilam. We're going to focus on the word l'oilam. L'oilam hu chayiv, you're always chayiv, ad shiachseren l'reshusai, until it's actually brought to his reshus, which means Rashi says shulbalim, so it's given back to the owner's reshus. Now, my oil means you're always responsible. It sounds pretty serious here. You take upon yourself a great level of responsibility. Lav, a film of basai must be even if it's in your house. And then again we see your shemasachar chayv b'geneva v'aveda. That's why it says oil. You're always going to be chayv until it's actually in his reshus. So you know what? I have to agree to you if we're dealing with animals. Says Rashi, "Bi'avedas bali chayim dechayev hamoitzi b'geneva v'aveda v'la mishum schar mitzvah el mishum degeneva aveda didhu pshiusahi." There's an element over here when it comes to an animal. Geneva v'aveda is considered to be is pshia. There's a greater likelihood of an animal getting lost. Let's just focus on the lost part, because an animal wanders as opposed to an inanimate object, an object that can't move, right? So therefore, you put it down, it's going to stay there unless someone else picks it up. But you have an animal, will move on its own. So there's a greater likelihood that it's going to get lost or possibly stolen, because it's going to go to another place and someone else will pick it up. So therefore, because of that, when it comes to Bali Chaim, he will agree that even though normally it's true you're going to be potter in your house because you're a Shomer Chinam, however, when it comes to Bali Chaim, the din is you're going to be chayiv. Right? Kivan, why? Again, Kivan dinaktilahu nigra b'raisa, since you have the obligation, it must be protected. Boy netirusi terta. Basically, because it's able to move around, therefore you are obligated to protect it. It says Rashi, nigra means psiois, because it has steps, it walks around, so therefore you have to watch it more. So by finding an animal, you are chayav gnei ba'aveda, since this animal wanders off, so it's like pshia. Okay, so at least they found common ground when we're dealing with Bali Chaim, that when it comes to a Shomer Aveda of an animal, that you're always going to be chayav gnei ba'aveda. Esvi Rabbi Rabbi Yosef. So now Rabbi asked a question to Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef was the one who's asking all the questions. Now, Rabbi Yosef says to Shomer Sachar, but listen to the pasuk. It says Hashev, which means you have to do, as Rashi says, Hashava mal yasa. You have to do a proper returning. Ainli el bevesai. I only know based on that it needs to be your house. Leginaso l'churbasu minayin. How do we know that not only does it have to, sounds like you have to put it into the owner's house. Maybe you can even put it in his garden or his churba, some type of buildings which are destroyed, demolished, but it's still his property. How do we know you could even just drop it off there? Talmud Loimer, Teshivim mikol makoim. So you can put it anywhere. As long as it's on his property, you return it, that's it. You've done your job. Now, what does it mean, leginaso churbasai? Ilim leginaso hamishtameres or churbaso hamishtameres hainu beso. If we're talking about just like a house which has walls, doors, everything's locked, so too we're talking about you put it into a garden and it's all fenced in. So what's the difference? What's the chiddush? Why would you think that's any different than a house? It's the same thing as a house because it's the same element of protection. So that cannot be what it's come to teach us. The chiddush is that even if it's a field, a garden that is not protected, there's no walls around it, just drop it off and that's good enough. Why would that be enough? Must be Must be because you don't really take upon yourself this great level of shmira, of this responsibility, and therefore all you have to do is give it there, and that's it. You don't have to deal with it anymore. So chayra, it's a raya that is showing that a Shomer Aveda only has the din of a Shomer Chinam. Or Malay, no. We're talking about that it's a place which has fences and it's protected. So then the question is, what's the chiddush? It's the same thing as a house. With the kakashalo chanu beisai, you ask the kashalo, it's the same thing as a house. Not necessarily. Hakamash was come to teach us do be inan das baalim. The whole chiddush is they do not need das baalim. What does that mean? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar, hakol strichim das baalim. When it comes to transactions, you always need das baalim. For example, Rashi says, Goyne v'goyzel o echad mi arba shaymim shehichser sarcha hodila baalim. You need to let the owner know, I stole your item. Here is your item that I stole. So he needs to know about it. You can't just drop it off and walk away and hope he finds out about it. So when it comes to all these different things, until you actually tell him, I am returning this item, this is by the Arba Shaymim too, then you're going to be chayiv. However, he says, Chutz mehashavas aveda. The chiddush is, even though it's completely fenced in, you would maybe think you need das baalim. Not when it comes to hashavas aveda. Shahari riv saboy Torah hashavas harbe. The fact that the Torah says hashavas harbe, it teaches us that we allow you to do it in this way, even though, of course, it has to be fenced in, just like a house. But the difference is that you do not need das baalim. That is the chiddush over here. Question 7. Hashev teshivim manis rabel hashava b'ha dekafel hatayr hashava b'aveda. So either tells you that you only have like the status of a shemer chinam, that even though it's a garden which is not shimer, it's not something which is very well protected, or actually is el baruch matsuya. So that's it. Or it's actually fenced in, and it's that the chiddush is shlo haidil labalim, that you don't have the obligation to have to warn the owner. Okay. Amle abayu Rav Yosef at tizbra. So you don't really hold the shemer aveda kashemer chinam dami. Is that really true? You don't hold like that? How could you tell me that you hold like it's a shemer sacher? But he says the following: Hatayin tainas ganav. This we're going to have these concepts ba'aveda over and over in Perek Meruba coming up pretty soon. Very famous parak coming up. Hatayin tainas ganav, a person who claims something was stolen. Ba'aveda, and it was a lost object. Misham tashumi kefil. So the din is you have to pay kefil. So let's take a step back and make sure we understand the case. Says Rashi, tainas ganav, lifter atzma alidi ganav. So this person who has an object that was lost, and he claims that I don't have it anymore because someone stole it. So Rashi's lifter atzma alidi ganav. He's trying to pot to himself, saying that it was stolen. Shetoyin nignava himenu ha'aveda shematzasi. The aveda which I found, I'm a shemer aveda. I'm claiming that it was stolen. Now we can understand where we're going here. Now, why would that be a good taina if you hold that he has the status of a shemer sacher? Shemer sacher is chayev b'geneva b'aveda. It must be the fact that he's making this taina. I mean, taintanis gana b'aveda is that a shemer aveda taka is not chayev b'geneva b'aveda, because otherwise, why would he be making this taina? So therefore, we should see from here a raya that someone who is a shemer of a lost object really only has the status of a shemer chinam who's pater geneva b'aveda, and that's the reason why he's making this taina to pater himself. V'nimsa shebiyadahu mishal tashumi kevel kiganav atzma. So what do we find? That he's trying, that it's in his hands that he would have to pay kevel like a ganav. The imlo, as it says over here in Perek Meruba, the imlo yimatze haganav imlo yimatze kamosh amar. If you didn't find out the way it was, elohu atzma ganva, that he actually is the one who stole it, not that someone else stole it, but this is the guy who's watching it. He's actually stealing it, and it says Yishalom Shnayim. There's a din kefil. There's a din not just for a ganav to pay kefil double, but even taintanis ganav, someone who is watching the object and he claims that it was stolen, but it turns out it was not the case. That he's the one who actually stole it, so he's also chayiv. So if you want to tell me that he's like a shemer chinam when it comes to watching an object that was lost, Mishum Hachim Mishum Kefil. That's the reason why he would normally have to pay Kefil, because he's trying to pater himself with Tainis Ganav. So therefore, again, this is, let's go back to the Gemara. So Hatayin Tainis Ganav Baveda. So a person says, I did find this object, but it was stolen from me. But he really had it, so he's chayav kefil. He tried to get out of paying when he said it was Geneva, it was stolen. So in that case, we say it must be he's chayav like a shemer chinam. Since we're saying it was stolen, he's saying it was stolen. Why was he saying it's stolen? Because he's trying to make himself pater from paying it, because that's the din. Only by a shemer chinam do we say he's pater migeneva. So he's a shemer. So against a raya, he's a shemer chinam. So let's see the Gemara again. Hatayin tanis gana b'aveda misham tashum b'kevel. V'yisach adak tashem sacher havi amam misham tashum b'kevel. Karnaboy shlume. She only have to pay the Karen. So amalei hachmai skin and can go into hatayin tanis listim mizuyin. So no, really he talks as a shemer sacher. So if it's a shemer sacher is chayav b'gnei b'aveda. So what he's saying was stolen. He's saying it was stolen by listim mizuyin, and therefore since it was listim mizuyim, that's considered to be an oinus. That's something which is beyond your control. You have armed bandits that rob you. That's something you can't control at all, and therefore, when it comes to that, it's possible that you would be pater, and therefore that's the taina. Being taintanas ganav, he wasn't saying that it was stolen, because if he was saying it was stolen, if you're a shemer sacher and you'd be chayav b'geneva. So rather, we're talking about the case of shemer chinam. That he so it must be a Shem Achinim. So no, he really said Shem Asachar, but the title was Listim Azuyim. So Listim Azuyim, this is not stealing behind someone's back. Armalei Listim Azuyim Gazlan who it's a Gazlan. The difference between a Ganav and a Gazlan is a Ganav pays kefil. However, a Gazlan only pays back the Karen, only the object. It was stolen in front of them, as the Gemara over there discusses the distinctions. Which one's worse? But nonetheless, that is the din. So what do you mean to pater himself from kefil? He doesn't have to pay kefil. If it's Melissa Mezuyim, the taina is not. He's not a gan. They're not ganav. It shouldn't say the language is a ganav. It's not taina tanis ganav. Right? It says Amalei Shani Oimer Lista Mezuyim. When it comes to armed bandits, kivan the mitmar meinshi, since they hide from people, ganavhu, they're still considered to be ganavim. So even though it's true. They actually will pay kefil, and they are considered to be a ganav, because even though it's true they steal with guns, but maybe they're wearing masks, they're still, or they don't want people to know their identity, so therefore they still have some element of being like a ganav to be chayiv kefil. Question 8a. Now let's look at question 8. He'im shomer pater atzma b'tainis listim azuyin. Ha'im listim azuyim mishalom kefel. So, shaymer a seicher. Oh, so listim azuyim im mishalom kefel tuli b'puktim ganavhu o gazlamhu. Right. So that's clearly it's a machlokas, as we just said. Shani oimer listim azuyim kivan the minto minchi ganavhu. So according to this opinion, he is they could talk and be ganavim. So again, that would be totally this machlokas whether listim azuyim is considered Genever Gazela, is a Seicher Potter from Tainus Listim Azuyim. So it says the Seicher is Potters himself, but Tainus Listim Azuyim. That is true, of course, because it's an Inus. Alright. Alright. So let's look at question 15. So we kind of TA 15. So we said that when it comes to an animal, so TA 15, when it comes to an animal, everyone agrees. There's no question. You're chayiv because it needs this extra protection. Therefore, you have like this element of a shemer sachar. However, kalim is a machlokas. When it comes to kalim, it is this machlokas. When it comes to a shemer aveda, what the status is. So TA 15 also actually start where we started is also nun vav amud beis. Okay. Let's look at TB 16 as well. Ainli ela beisai likinasa charbasa manayin. So Talmud Leimer Tashivim. Makamash one kra yisera ligina likinasa charbasai. So this we actually was the same question as question 7, which is TB 16, which either tells you that it's like a din of a shomer chinam, or telling you the din is that it is that you do not need das balam. Okay. All right, let's continue. Esvei for the Gemara as we continue to Nun Zayin Medbeis. The Gemara asks the following question. Lo, no. Amarta, if you tell me b'shomer chinam regarding someone who is a shomer, who is watching the item for free, shikain, when it comes to it being toin tanas ganev. When it comes to a shomer chinam, when he's toin tanas ganev, so misham tashlumi kefel, it says that you do pay kefel in that situation. That person who is toin tanas ganev, and he ends up getting caught that he's actually the one who stole, so then he has to pay kefel. So timer b'shomer sacher sheina misham tashlumi kefel. When it comes to shomer sacher, he doesn't pay kefil. Now we're saying that the case of listim mezuyim is a case of not gezela, but a case of geneva. So if that's true, nimsa b'shomer sacher misham tashlumi kefil b'toin tanas listim mezuyim. we actually do find when it comes to a Shomer Sacher that he could be chayiv by being toin tanas ganav. Because we usually said, no, you're not chayiv. Toin tanas ganav is not a taina, because maybe he only has the din of a Shomer Achinam and not a Shomer Sacher. No, it's true. He could still have the taina as a Shomer Sacher of being toin tanas ganav. Specifically, if he's talking about tainas of Lista Mizuyin, and that they will have to pay kefil, or that he would have to pay kefil. So Amalei Hachi Karmu Lo. This is how you're supposed to read it. Ima Marta B'Shem Rechinam Shechin B'Shem Tashim Kefil B'Chol Tanoisav, in all claims of Geneva, not just by Lista Mizuyin, in all claims, even if it's not as armed bandits. Time B'Shem Sacher Shin B'Shem Tashim Kefil El B'Tain Tan is Lista Mizuyin. So it's true, there are cases, but we want to mention it all inclusive or not all inclusive. Esvei. The pasuk says by a shoyel, by someone who borrows the object, it says v'nishmar omes, that in the event that this thing breaks or dies, then the shomer is going to be the shoyel, the borrower is going to be chayiv. Ein le'ela shvur omesa. I only know these two cases, which are oinsin, that he's going to be still chayiv. Geneva aveda menayin. How do we know if it gets lost or stolen, he's going to be chayiv? So 1 second. Amarta kavachimer. When it comes to a Shomer Sacher, they are going to be pater if it breaks or it dies, because it's an einus. Even a Shomer Sacher is chai b'geneva aveda, even though they're pater when it comes to shvur mesa. So shoyel, a borrower, which has the highest level of responsibility because they're getting hana and they're not even paying for it. So shechai b'shvur mesa eno din shechai b'geneva aveda. So there's no way of backing out of this one. This is a very clean, clear kal v'chaimer, that obviously a shoyel is going to be chayiv in Geneva Aveda, as they're chayiv already, as we know from the pasuk, you're going to be chayiv nishbaro mace. So since the pasuk says you're chayiv by nishbaro mace, certainly going to be chayiv by Geneva Aveda, as we see by Shomer Sacher. Now, if you want to tell me the case of Lista Mizuim is the case of a ganav, why don't you have an answer? Equal mifrach, you can mess up the kal v'chayim in the following way and say, when it comes to someone who's paid, maybe this is why he's chayiv for Geneva Aveda dafko by a Shomer Sacher, because he's also chayiv when it comes to Lista Mizuyin. Masha Einkin, when it comes to a shoyel, maybe we don't find this, that maybe there is no chayiv, so it's not a kal v'chaymer for a shoyel. Amalek Savar Haitan, that this Tan holds Karnabul Shvua Adifa, that this chayiv of the shoyel is even more strict. The fact that you have to pay Karen even without a shvua. Mikfela bishvua. Then the Shomer Sacher, that even though they'll end up having to pay more, they have to pay kefel, but it's only after a shvua is made. Let's hold off 1 second. Let's look at this Rashi. Shoyel Odef. Shemeschayim b'shvur meisa below shem shvir sheker. It happens, they are chayiv. If this animal dies or gets breaks its leg, whatever it is, the shoyel has to pay. There's no recourse. There's nothing they can do. They have to pay. Of course, they don't pay kefel. They didn't steal it, but they have to pay for the animal. They have to pay the Karen. So that is even worse. The fact that you automatically have to pay is worse than Shomer Sacher shepater olehen. Even though it's true, the Shomer Sacher is pater when it comes to these things. The alpha b'yishesh b'Shomer Sacher kefel. Sometimes they have to pay double. That's between tennis listim mezuyin and zechaymer. The kefil ain't b'shaymerin ad sheyishbol a sheker shenignav himenu. He has to first make a shvua. V'yachach bo edim, witnesses come to disprove it. Hilka kanasa mishum shvuhu the kansi rachmana. The whole point is because of a shvua. So therefore, the truth is, shoyel is worse. The fact that you have to automatically have to pay the Karen without any question, without a shvua, as opposed to even paying more kefel, but with a shvua. Leima Masaile. Let's say the following statement is actually going to be a proof. Says Rashi that Lista Mizuyim is actually the category of a ganav, and there would be a din kefel. By Toin Tanas Ganav, by Lista Mizuyim, you would have to pay kefel on that. If a person is renting out a cow from his friend, the nignava, and it gets stolen. The Amr Halah, and he says, Hareini Mishalim, I'm going to pay. The Eino Nishma, I do not want to make a shvua, I just want to pay you right away. Even though I could make a shvua of some sort to be able to get out of paying, I just want to pay. That's it. So I'm going to pay and go above and beyond my chiyuv, my ability to be able to make a shvua. V'yachach nimsa haganav. And all of a sudden they find the ganim. So Mashal Tashmi Kefil is Seicher. So the Kefil actually will now go to the Seicher, to the renter. Because the renter went above and beyond. Again, he could have made a Shavua to pot himself. The fact he didn't do so, therefore the Kefil, this extra money, this double, goes to the Seicher. Savruach, so again, it doesn't mean the Karen goes. It means the Kefil. Okay. Now Savruach Rabbi Huda. The holding Rabbi Huda, the Amr Seicher Kanesa Sachar Dami, which is a machlokas. The renter, Seicher, is a machlokas, what status they have. Is a Shem Chinam, Shem Sachar. So a Seicher, according to Rabbi Huda, has the same status as a Shemer Sachar, which means that a Shemer Sachar, just like a Shemer Sachar, we know is Chayv Genim Ba'aveda, so too when it comes to a Seicher, to a renter. Uminitani, if Omer Hareinu Mishalim, I could pay the Einu Nishma, I'm not going to make a Shvua, Mechal the E-boy Patule Nashim Shvua. He could have gotten out of making a Shvua. Now, Hechidam, what Shvua could he have said? Going to Katayin Tanis List of Mazuyin. He couldn't have said that it was stolen, because if he has the status of a shemer sachar, shows if a seicher is like a seicher is like a nice sachar, so then he's chayav b'gneva b'aveda. So you can't make that taina and say it was stolen, because you'd be still chayav for it. So what only taina could he have that it was stolen b'listim mezuyim, which is really not shliach. It must be that the fact that there's kefil to be paid, it must, or in this case, it turns out that we actually found the ganav, then he must be a ganav, because if the list of mezuyim were gazlanim, then you wouldn't pay kefil. So otherwise, again, how could he pater himself? He's like a shemer sachar, which is chayv b'gneva. So therefore, that must be the case, and therefore, because that's the case, the chiddush is that a shemer sachar, that a list of mezuyim, they actually are like it's like Geneva. So Amri no, me Savrit Rabbi Huda, who says that we're forcing ourselves to be like the Shita Rabbi Huda, the Amr Seicher Kanesa Sachar Dami, Democrat Mayor Sriole, the Amr Seicher Kashem Machinam Dami. Very poshut. You can say, yeah, he has a great taina. His taina is it was stolen. What do you mean it was stolen? Yeah, because if you have the din of a shemer chinam is pater b'gneva aveda. So therefore, a seicher can make that taina of geneva and then pater himself. And the fact that he didn't, that's the reason why he gets the kefil. But it's because the kefil is coming from a real ganav, not list of mezuyim. So it's not a raya. Iboy seim, or you can say kida machlif rabba boravua. But Tani, like he changed a bit, and he said the following. He said, "V'tani seicher." Ketza mishalem. How does a seicher pay? Rameir omer kishemer sacher. Yehuda omer kishemer chinam. So Yehuda is the one who says that the din is that a seicher is like a shemer chinam. He flips it, right? He changes the order. He's machlef the shitas. Rav Zer omer hachamay skinan b'toin tainis listim azuyin. V'nimsa listim she'ena mezuyin. So another answer, Pasha, that you did make a taina of tainas listim mezuyin, but it turned out that they were not listim mezuyin, but they were ganavim. So you made that taina, but they were actually ganavim. Okay, so that is another shot which needs a little bit of work. Let's look in Rashi. Olam kashem sachar dami. He be chayiv by geneva aveda. I feel hachi. Lo tesayi behind the ktani kefel belistim she'ena mezuyin kaimer, because why would they have to pay kefel? The by skinan between tanis listim mezuyin behilkach iboy ifter nimsa hagan nimsa she'ena mezuyin who bar kefel who. So he really made the tain of tain. He said listim mezuyin, which is the only thing he could say, because shemer sachar is maybe chayiv in geneva. So he had to say listim mezuyin. So then, if that's the situation that we're talking about listim mezuyin, so it's a raya. No, it's not a raya, because he could have gotten out of it. So why does he get kefil? Because the people that actually stole, he was right, it was stolen, but it was not stolen by listim mezuyim, as he claimed. It was actually real ganavim. So the question is, again, it's an interesting way of thinking, is that l'chayra you would think, well, Lamaskana, he really didn't have ability to make a shvua, because the shvua that he could have made b'metzias is that it was geneva, and he'd be chai b'geneva. Okay, ayin the mafarshim. That's a kasha to we'll leave with that. We're gonna stop there, and that is it. Adkan.